Do you have colleagues that seem to be able to stay on top of the latest issues, trends, and resources in education? They make networking look so easy, and you're wondering, where do they have the time to do this? And where are they getting all this information? If you're like me, I didn't know really where to begin. It seems as though you can find anything on the internet these days, but that makes it even more overwhelming. I was given a book recommended by colleagues a couple of months ago, which helped me begin to work through these challenges. After being introduced to this book, those same colleagues connected me to the author, and today I would like to introduce you to him. Tom Whitby, who is an educational social media consultant, is also the founder of 7 educational groups on LinkedIn, including the largest one with over 12,000 members. Tom has presented at many local, national, and international conferences on social media. He writes for several educational journals, including Learning and Leading. He is also the author of the Relevant Educator, which focuses on drawing awareness to educators on the choices they have when it comes to social media and where to go and find the best information for their needs. My name is Jerry Pettigrew, a Global Professional Manager at Crisis Prevention Institute, and I will be conducting today's interview. Good morning, Tom. How are you doing?
Good morning, Jerry. Doing very well, thank you.
Good. Tom, can you start by telling us a little bit about your professional background and where your interest in and expertise about social media comes from?
Well, I actually started out as an English teacher. For 34 years, I was a secondary teacher. And then the last 6 years after that, I was an adjunct professor of education for St. Joseph's College here in New York. So it gives me 40 years experience in the classroom. I never was an administrator. And I kind of think that gives me a somewhat unique perspective on the profession, as it were. I got involved in social media probably 2004, 2005. I was initially involved with LinkedIn, which is kind of a professional social media networking application. LinkedIn, many professionals go on there and put their profiles up seeking other jobs or connecting with other people in their industries. And that was my initial experience. And in doing that, I started about 5 different groups on education within LinkedIn. And at that point, I started connecting to more and more educators with many discussions that were going on. And I noticed that people kept coming up with ideas and references to sources using very small URLs. And I couldn't understand where they were getting these from. Actually, they were bit.ly URLs. And I know now that it's a way of taking a very long URL address, putting it into an application, and making it a much smaller address. And in asking these people where they were getting this information from, Twitter was what kept coming up. So I started to explore what Twitter was. And like many, many people, probably about 85% of all the people out there, I got on Twitter, and I was on it for maybe a couple of weeks, had no idea what it was, couldn't get a grasp of it. So I dropped off for a couple of months. Then after that, somebody actually sat me down, explained to me exactly what was going on, realizing that the only people who will see what I put out are the people that I am connected to. Once I understood that, then I started connecting with many, many people, and Twitter began to grow for me. Till today, I think I've got well over 70,000 followers on Twitter. So, one thing led to another, and after that, I started on Twitter the first successful education chat, called EdChat. Many people are familiar with it because EdChat itself has become a hashtag that people just put onto any educational tweet these days, and it kind of extends the range. So if you've got 10 people following you, and you put a tweet out, only those 10 people see it. But if you put a hashtag on it, anyone following that hashtag will see that tweet. And there are literally thousands of educators who follow the EdChat hashtag. Once we established EdChat, which is a weekly chat that educators get involved with, we started out probably with 1,000 educators back then involved in that chat. And things just started growing from there. That's when I found out about Ning, which is a place where you can go and develop communities, and I developed what was called the Educator's PLN, PLN standing for Personal Learning Network. And I established that community for any educators interested in finding sources and strategies to create a PLN, and that was called the Educator's PLN. That's still active today with about 18,000 educators from around the world. And then from there, I developed a blog. I started blogging, and that's called My Island View, and that's on WordPress. So if anyone wants to access that, that would be tomwhitby.wordpress.com, and you can pretty much see my entire educational philosophy through those blog posts. And then after that, I was involved with BAM Radio, which is a network of educational radio shows, and that's totally internet-based. So you can download podcasts of your favorite radio shows, and I've been doing the EdChat radio show for about 3 years now, which just discusses each of the EdChats which come out weekly. So there are 3 years of weekly EdChat analysis on that. And that's pretty much how I've got involved with social media.
Oh, that's amazing, and it sounds like you have an incredible amount of experience not only in education but now also with social media. And I think another good place for us to take this conversation is, in your book you talk about the profound effect that technology has had on education in the last 10 years. Can you give a little bit more of your perspective on that effect for us?
Yeah, I think the two biggest influences social media has had on education is, number one, through collaboration, number two, through transparency. The idea that collaboration, the best thing I can do is give you an example. When I was an English teacher and I had 11 people in my department, if I wanted to teach something in Shakespeare, I could simply turn to the 11 people in my department and say, has anybody got any great ideas that I can, work up a lesson on Shakespeare? And those 11 people would all help me do that. But if I said to them, colleagues, I need to do a lesson on Shakespeare, but I want to incorporate some technology into that, they couldn't help me because many of them were not technology-based. What they would do, they would come to me for the technology ideas. So I had no one to turn to at that point. I was limited to the people that I had in my building and limited to the skills that they had. Now, with the advent of social media and connections I can make through collegial sources, I now have access to anybody in the world that I want access to. So I've expanded my network of sources, collegial sources, to a point where I don't need to depend on those 11 people anymore. I can go to other experts in the